Let's start this video by looking at two sets of photographs here. You can clearly tell that one set looks way more professional than the other set, even though you know that both were taken with great photography equipment. So, what is it that separates the pros from the novices? What is it that the novices are not doing to reach that pro level? If you've been doing wildlife photography for a while and you can't seem to shake off the idea that your photos just simply cannot compare to the pros, or if you want to take it up to the next level, then this video is just for you. In here, I'm going to assume that you already know the basics of photography, so I won't be going into those. My name is Terence and I've been doing wildlife photography for the past 10 years. I'm currently a Nikon ambassador as well as having worked with multiple other brands. My aim is to spread awareness about the biodiversity here on our planet as well as to help you learn more about wildlife photography. RAW versus JPEG. There's no question about it. All the pros, almost all of them, shoot RAW. Now, the thing is that post-production is actually a big part of the whole photography process. If you don't know the difference between RAW and JPEG, you can go and check out other videos online that are able to better explain the difference between RAW and JPEG. But essentially the main difference is that RAW contains a lot more information that can then be manipulated later during your editing phase. And in here, manipulation doesn't mean adding or removing things in Photoshop, but rather adjusting colors and contrast to give a very specific look to your image. Editing can be a way to define your style of photography. So for instance, I tend to have a dark and moody look to my wildlife photographs, and so editing can help to add that personal touch to your photos. Now, definitely you will need some kind of post-production software in order for you to edit. So for instance, for myself, I use Lightroom. But there are other free softwares available online as well, and you can definitely go and find and Google these yourself. Editing is not just adjusting your crop, your contrast and saturation, which is what most beginners tend to do. There's a lot more to editing than just those. For instance, you can learn how to utilize masks as well as hue adjustments. And you can also learn theories like color theories and compositions in order to help you make better creative decisions in post-production, which definitely goes a long way to create more unique photographs. I noticed that most beginners tend to place a very heavy emphasis on the subject. Is my animal looking good? Is it doing something interesting? Does my animal look sharp? But another thing that's equally important is everything else that's in frame, and that includes your background as well as your foreground. You can have a photo of an animal that's doing something super unique and everything about the particular subject is perfect technically, but if your background and your foreground is super cluttered, then I'm afraid that photograph is not going to work as well. Learning how to position yourself to be able to get a clean background and foreground is an essential skill to have in your wildlife photography journey. Photography at its core is all about being able to see light and shadow. So, learning about light is integral in all kinds of photography, and that includes wildlife photography as well. Hard light, soft light, golden hour light, midday sunlight, and learning how to use artificial light like strobes and flashes is all part of learning lighting for wildlife photography. Now, most of the time we want to aim for soft lighting, but that can be boring sometimes because it makes the image look a bit flat. Hard light can be dramatic and good looking, but only works well at certain times of the day. For instance, the midday sun will often cause shadows to fall underneath the subject, which does not look good. For some animals, they only tend to show their colors best when there is a pop of light hitting them. And for other animals like reptiles, for instance, you're actually able to use artificial lighting like strobes, flashes, and LED lighting, which is a skill to master in itself. For the more advanced ones, you also have textured lighting. For instance, when the light dapples through the trees or when sunlight shines through fog. All these can provide dimensions to your image. Every good photographer has a style that he or she will be known for. Having consistency, having that style is your personal signature brand. What constitutes a style, you might ask? Well, it could really be anything, as long as it's consistent throughout your body of work. Perhaps you only shoot wildlife with a wide-angle lens. Perhaps you only shoot animal portraits. Perhaps you only shoot animals that are on water bodies, or you only shoot reptiles. Or It could be in the edit as well. Perhaps you like to go for a more dark and moody look, or you prefer a more bright and high-key look. This style should be something that you enjoy producing and should scream you. Other people will be able to see your picture and go, oh, you're the photographer that took this image. Your style doesn't have to be the same all the time. It could be ever-changing, but having a style at all times will help to define your photography and set you apart. Something that beginners tend to often do is to stay at a spot where an animal is and then chase it as it moves along. While this can certainly be a strategy for getting some images, it will often leave you with less than desirable photos as you are trying to keep up. What more experienced wildlife photographers tend to do is that they will wait it out at a specific place where they think the animal is going to go to. This is a skill that does not come easily, as you have to really understand animal behavior. Now, of course, one of the things that you can do is to research beforehand to understand the animal's behavior so that you can try and predict its movements. Or, more likely, it comes from repeated encounters with the same individual animal and knowing what its patterns are. After all, animals are creatures of habit, and after you know their routine and their patterns, you're able to better predict what kind of movements they will make. Being one step ahead of the animal will allow you sufficient time to envision your shot, prepare and set up, frame before you even pull that trigger. This will result in a much higher success rate of getting the photos that you want. Now, most pros don't just go out, shoot as they please. They go out with a very specific image in mind and try to achieve that shot. It's not as vague as, oh, today I'm going to go out and get a photograph of a tiger. It should be something more like, today I'm going to go out and get a photograph of a tiger that's walking in the early morning light against the trees that hopefully are able to fall into shade and thus creating a darker background. When you have this clear an image in your head, then your brain is wired to try and make your body get that shot. Doing something like this constantly and always having a certain vision or picture in your head will push your boundaries towards creating better and better pictures. Of course, it's normal that most of the time your expectations will fall short and you'll come back empty-handed. Now, by empty-handed, I actually mean you will still come back with some pictures, but these pictures may not live up to your expectations and not the vision that you had in mind. But that's the key to progress, having high standards and pushing yourself until you get your desired result. Taking photos of wildlife can be fun, but let's be honest about it, most of the time these wild animals aren't really doing anything. Maybe it's a bird perched on a tree or an animal that's sleeping. Most wildlife photographers are just happy to see the animal and photograph it as it is. But the truly good photographs are a result of waiting for animal behavior. Animal behavior is much more interesting to see in a photograph than an animal resting or sleeping. And here are 4 main types of animal behavior that you should be aware of. The first is eating or drinking. The second is moving. The third is mating. And the fourth is interacting with other animals or other things. Being able to wait it out and capture any of these 4 categories of behavior will definitely elevate your photography above the standard photos of an animal. It's nice to own a shiny new piece of camera equipment, but what good is it really if you don't know how to use it to its full potential? The person who has an intimate knowledge of his old trusty DSLR versus the newbie who just got the greatest and latest camera equipment, I'm going to bet that the former guy is able to take way better photos than the latter. You have to be able to operate your camera blindfolded, where your shutter speed is, your aperture, your ISO controls, how to change focus modes, where you put your shortcuts. All of these should be able to be changed in a second. If you're busy fiddling with buttons and looking down at your camera, then precious seconds are lost and decisive moments are gone just like that. I always suggest to people to take a few days or even weeks to really learn and understand their camera. Go and do test shoots at home, outside, anywhere. Take photos of random things, even if they don't interest you. Understand the strengths and limitations of your camera. Then, when you want to take photos proper, you are able to troubleshoot any issues fast without having to Google how to do this or that. Photography, just like many other things in life, has its rules, and I don't really call them rules, I prefer to call them guidelines. These rules or guidelines are really just there to help you understand the basics of how to make more aesthetically pleasing images. You can find these rules online and learn how to apply them into your photography. But what the pros do is learning how to break these rules, and this definitely comes with experimentation. For instance, a general rule of thumb is to always keep your shutter speed at double your focal length. So if I am at 400 mm, I want to be shooting at 1/800th of a second. I used to keep to that rule religiously. Then you find out it doesn't really always have to work that way. For instance, if I want to induce motion in my subject, then I can choose to lower the shutter speed. It is only with experimentation that your photographs will improve. If you do exactly what everybody else is doing, then you'll end up with exactly the same pictures. Now, this last one is an important one. All too often, people go out, take wildlife photos, come back, they may or may not process them, and then they may or may not upload on their Instagram, and then it just stays in the archives forever. But what you should do is to always relook your old photos, find out what works and what areas there are for improvement. For instance, this time round you took a photo of an animal. Great, it looks alright, but you relook it and think, okay, what could be improved? Perhaps the next time round when I encounter this animal, I want to shoot it at eye level. Or perhaps the next time round when I see it, I want to wait for it to move to a position where I can photograph it against a cleaner background. Noting these areas for improvement and keeping them at the back of your mind is key to creating progress. Improving your photos is a slow process, but you will definitely see results over time. Going out time and again, mindlessly taking these photographs is never going to improve your photography. But if you're always looking to find ways to improve, then you will most definitely improve your photography.